Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Buenos dias. My name is Ray Rast, and I'm a founding board member for LHC. As some of you heard last night, I'm also a retiring board member, departing board member for LHC, and I was one of the people that stood up. This is my 5th Congreso, and I don't know how we do it, but each one has been better than the previous. So no pressure, Eddie. I think we're in good hands for number 6. And I'm very excited about that. So today it's my great honor to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Antonia Castañeda. As most of you know, I'm sure, and as many of us heard yesterday in Dr. Sarah Gould's wonderful introduction, Dr. Castañeda is a Tejano-born Chicana feminist historian. She earned her PhD in history at Stanford University. She's a professor emerita at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. Dr. Castañeda has written and or co-edited numerous influential books and articles, including the prize-winning article, Women of Color and the Rewriting of Western History, the Discourse, Politics, and Decolonization of History. But Dr. Castañeda is here with us today, I think, in large part because she also, in addition to all of her amazing scholarships, she's given so much of her time and her energy and her wisdom to the cause of organizing colleagues and advocating for history, inclusivity, equity, and justice, not only in academia, but also in the spaces of historic preservation and heritage conservation. To that end, she has served as a founding member of San Antonio's West Side Preservation Alliance. All of these are going to be applause worthy. She was a Scholars Advisory Board member for the Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Project. She served as a Scholars Panel member for the National Park Service's American Latino Heritage Initiative. And this is far from the whole list, but the last one here for me is that she has also served as a founding board member for Latinos in Heritage Conservation. So that's the brief, formal introduction, like a little bit of your CV. But Dolores Huerta, was it her or somebody else that said, we're all Dolores and Dolores is us? And I was thinking, I was planning to say this. In my mind, everyone in this room is LHC. This is LHC when we think of what is LHC, and this is LHC. And so I really need every single one of you in this room to understand the importance of Antonia Castañeda's influence, not just as a scholar and a teacher, but as a leader, as a mentor, as an ally, as a good troublemaker, as a role model, as a colleague, and as a friend. I started my own work, as some of you know, in Latinx preservation efforts around 25 years ago, and at a low point during those early efforts on my part, when it felt like most of the work I was doing was both an uphill battle and one that I was fighting in isolation, I discovered the unsung work that Antonia had done 20 years prior to that on the California survey project known as 5 Views. And I love that Josie spoke to about 5 Views and this, how it was, at least for me, just a revelation, right? This like bright light that's shining when there's like dark moments, and the inspiration that came from that for me personally was phenomenal. So then when I finally met Antonia through our work with the National Park Service, I had that wonderful experience, which I'm sure many of you have had, of meeting someone for the first time, and you know who they are, and their work has inspired you, and you're maybe a little nervous But the experience was wonderful for me because it turned out that Antonia was not only as brilliant as I expected, but also incredibly kind and supportive and empowering. Antonia's role in the founding and the growth of LHC was vital, and I'm so pleased to know that even as this organization continues to grow, Antonia's vision and passion and fearlessness are forever baked into its DNA. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Antonia Castañeda.
Gracias y buenas tardes. Qué gusto estar aquí con ustedes. So much that I would like to say, but we don't have a lot of time, so let me go ahead with this presentation entitled Right-Wing Suppression and Renewed Obliteration of Latino History, the National Museum of the American Latino, the NMAL. Recently, oops, I gotta get my glasses on porque no puedo ver. Recently, two pivotal exhibitions on Latino history, initial precursors to the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino, were changed or replaced. Presente, a Latino history of the United States at the Molina Gallery in the National Museum of American History that opened in June 2022, was changed. What was to be the largest federally funded Smithsonian exhibition on Latino civil rights history, and whose working title was, quote, Latino Youth Movements, unquote, has been scuttled. The exhibit was scotched after Republican Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and Tony Gonzalez, co-chairs of the Congressional Hispanic Conference and members of the powerful Congressional Appropriations Committee, stridently objected to the presentation and interpretation of Latino history that the exhibition, the nascent Latino Museum, presented, and threatened to defund the NMAL. After Diaz-Balart, Gonzalez, and others met with the Secretary of the Smithsonian and Director of the NMAL sometime during the week of July 23rd to the 28th of 2023, some of the labels in the Presente exhibit were changed, and the Latino Youth Movements exhibition would be replaced by an exhibition on salsa. In provoking the cancellation of the Latino Youth Movement exhibit, right-wing politicians essentially and effectively suppressed the work of Joana Fernandez and Felipe Hinojosa, Latinx historians who were working with the museum curators to develop the exhibit. Presumably, the changes were made to mollify right-wing congressmen, but obviously they were not enough to stop them from making good on their threats and defunding the NMAL. On July 24, 2023, during the first session of the 118th Congress, House Republicans advanced their fiscal year 2024 Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies funding bill. The Smithsonian Institution and a host of other national arts and humanities institutions fall under Title III, the, quote, related agencies, end quote, section over which the Appropriations Committee has budgetary authority. The sections and respective prohibitions or limitations being advanced by the bill are listed near the end of the document. Section 459, which relates to the Smithsonian Institution, lists only one limitation, which reads as follows, quote, none of the funds made available by this act shall be obligated for the planning, design, or construction of the National Museum of the American Latino or the operation of the Molina Family Latino Gallery, close quotes. When the bill was sent to the floor for approval, the rationale for defunding the NMAL included such statements as, quote, the overt bias, lack of diversity, and flippancy with which serious issues are addressed, Continuing, the museum almost myopically portrays Latinos as an oppressed monolith, united largely by their victimhood. Moreover, the lightness with which serious topics are portrayed is a problem. The bill charges that the museum bill is characterized by, quote, a romanticization of socialism and a failure to adequately document or portray the reality of totalitarianism, close quotes. The language in the bill further adds, quote, the committee will revisit the issue should comprehensive and earnest efforts be undertaken to accurately present the varied histories, contributions, and authentic experience of the wide range of those who can constitute the American Latino community of the United States, close quotes. The Democratic members of the Appropriations Committee, who are in the minority, strenuously objected to what Congresswoman Rosa DeLaudo termed the, quote, numerous discriminatory writers which are so divisive. Disagreeing with an exhibit, DeLaudo continued, does not give the Republicans license to erase the Smithsonian's effort to operate an existing gallery or the decades-long pursuit to recognize the many ways Latinas and Latinos have shaped this nation, close quote. Congressman Adriano Espaillat's amendment to strike the prohibition failed. The Republicans defeated the amendment in a partisan vote of 27 to 33. The National Museum of the American Latino and the Molina Gallery were thus defunded. Lest we think the National Latino Museum and Molina Gallery were the only target of the right wing, the executive order funding prohibition includes the following, and I quote. Sorry, okay, can you still hear me? Okay. None of the funds, quote, none of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this act may be available to implement, administer, apply, enforce, or carry out Executive Order 13985 of January 2021, relating to advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities throughout the federal government. Executive Order 14035 of June 25, 2021, relating to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workforce, or Executive Order 14091 of February 16, 2023, relating to further advancing racial equity and support for underserved community through the federal government. Section 455 further states, none of the funds made available by this act may be used to carry out any program, project, or activity that promotes or advances critical race theory or any concept associated with critical race theory, close quotes. The animus to defund the NMAL first surfaced publicly in an op-ed, quoted, the Smithsonian Latino exhibit is a disgrace, close quotes, which conservative political commentators Alfonso Aguilar, Mike Gonzalez, and Joshua Trevino published in the newsletter The Hill on August 11th, 2022. Quote, a new Latino exhibit at the National Museum of American History, they write, offers an unabashedly Marxist portrayal of history, religion, and economics. It is, quite frankly, disgraceful. Its only redeeming quality is that it makes clear why the forthcoming National Museum of the American Latino must not be funded, unquote. The piece goes on to deride the museum and those who promote historical narratives examining issues of imperialism and its consequences. Aguilar, Gonzalez, and Trevino, respectively president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and chief of intelligence and research or director for Texas Identity at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, penned a second column in September of 2023. Quote, don't make taxpayers fund Smithsonian's Latino Museum, unquote, which is informed by the same right-wing anti-woke culture war diatribes. But defunding the NMAL has not been enough for right-wing assaults on Latinx access to and presence in the foremost national historical and cultural institution. On February 22nd, 2024, Edward Bloom, the legal strategist behind the Supreme Court case that dismantled affirmative action in college admissions, filed a lawsuit against the director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino and the director of the Institute of Museum and Library Services over an internship that strives to increase Latino representation in key museum roles. According to the museum's website, quote, the 12-week program is designed to increase hands-on training opportunities for Latina, Latino, and Latinx identifying undergraduate students interested in museum careers, close quote. Together, the congressional legislation of 2020 that initiated the process of creating a national Latino museum and the creation of this 12-week Latino museum internship program represented a critical culmination of a 40-plus year struggle to establish and to ensure Chicano Latino presence at the Smithsonian. The early struggle is documented in multiple committee and task force reports and publications, the most salient of which are Willful Neglect, the Smithsonian Institution and U.S. Latinos of 1994, and Towards a Shared Vision, U.S. Latinos and the Smithsonian Institution, 1997. Other important antecedents to the NMAL were development of graduate student seminars in 1990, at which Tomás Ibarra Frausto, whom many of you know, and myself were faculty in those seminars, and the establishment of the Smithsonian Center for Latino Initiatives in 1997, which became the Smithsonian Latino Center in 2006. The National Museum of the American Latino has been a long time coming. Its defunding, as Congresswoman De Laudo has stated, may set its establishment back at least 10 years. At issue in the defunding of the NMAL and removal of the Latino Youth Movement exhibition from the Molina Gallery is, of course, who controls a historical narrative of Latinos in the United States, who tells the stories, how are the stories told, and what sources are used to frame, to tell, to analyze, and to interpret those histories. Subscribing to a triumphalist immigrant Latino history, the right wing seeks to obliterate discussion, analysis, and interpretation that does not accord with their notion of history, which not only categorically rejects the historical centrality of imperialism and its consequences, but principally consists of the adulation of military heroes. Such is their construction of history, notwithstanding that the history of the various Latina, Latino, Latinx communities of the United States, whether native-born or immigrant, are informed by imperialism. Imperialism is and has been for over a century a suspect label in the discourse of our society. Over the past 75 years, Latinx activists and scholars have challenged the master narrative that obscures, occludes, or denies the manifestation of imperialism, whether dispossession, exploitation, or denigration of the multiple Latino communities, societies, and nations. Our research and scholarship have resulted in narratives that expose the falsehood, misrepresentations, and myths that have for so long characterized narratives about our experience in the United States. We are here today. We can be here today, precisely because of the decades-long work of those generations of scholars, beginning with Arte Público Press and the Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Program. The scholarly conferences, grants, and support of research, publication of innumerable books, the periodical, digital, and other collections that enable Latinx scholars to research, write, and publish, empower, and authorize our right to write, speak, and be always, but most especially in times of banning, censorship, and persecution. Our efforts and gains are now being aggressively countered. I cite 3 manifestations of the very problematic and ultimately very dangerous situation, all informed by right-wing ideology and underwritten by right-wing ideologues. The first, as described above, is the attack on curators at the newly established Smithsonian Latino Museum for developing exhibits and exhibitions that present a counter to the hegemonic construction of Latinos as non-US or anti-US. The second is a national initiative to subvert policies and programs to address the effects of the historical exclusion of Latinas and Latinos, both de jure and de facto, from participation in the institutional and social life of the US. The third are state-level initiatives, most prominently in Florida and Texas, to construct the discourses and policies of decolonization and dehumanization as hurtful and subversive in order to eliminate them. The study of the historical experience of the Mexican origin population was born in struggle, a struggle against historians who claimed we had no history or that our historical experience was unconnected to what was deemed US history. In place of historically grounded scholarship, what was propagated in a range of academic arenas were myths, distortions, and outright lies. For the past 6 decades, historians who identify as Chicana Chicanos have challenged that construction. A new threat to the importance and centrality of Chicana Chicanx history has arisen as one consequence of the expansion of the field to include the histories of the many communities of Caribbean, Central, and South American origin who now constitute part of US society. Right-wing academics, citizens, and politicians from some of these communities have embarked on an effort to challenge the narratives developed by Chicanx historians, narratives, analysis, and interpretations shared with their Puerto Rican counterparts, which argues that the long-standing hegemonic narrative of the US denies the importance and centrality of Mexican Americans and other non-white communities to the development of the United States. This wing of the political right has sought to replace that narrative with one in which the international role of the US has been to provide a refuge for the victims of predatory governments and to offer them opportunities. The question before us, as scholars, as activists, as advocates, is how to respond to the challenge that this renewed assault on our struggle to change the master narrative of US, a narrative that distorts and degrades our historical experience and our cultural expression and dismisses our efforts to correct that record. What do we do? This, unabashedly, is a call to action. Gente, dear gente, raza. First and foremost, we do not remain silent. We must not remain silent. We cannot remain silent. We respond as we always have responded, through action, especially through collective action. We refuse to accept the dangerous precedent the defunding of the NMAL sets, that politicians who hold the purse strings can dictate the interpretation of history. In brief, let us organize, organize, organize. We must alert each other. We must involve any association with whom we are affiliated about this matter. Ask their leadership and members to take up this issue. Write, or better yet, go see your congressperson and state your concerns. Express your support for the NMAL to Dr. Lonnie Bunch, Secretary of the Smithsonian, and to Mr. Jorge Samanillo, Director of the National Museum of the American Latino. Stay alert, present, and engaged in the issue of Latinx, Chicanx presence and representation in the Smithsonian, the institution that embodies the history and culture of this country, and do this all beginning with a membership in Latinos in Heritage Conservation. Gracias. So I'm done. I don't know. ¿Qué más?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. First thing we need to do is change the Congress. Just takes a few.
De acuerdo.
That was great.
Thank
Not
you.
great what they're doing, but your presentation was great. I imagine someone who's been in this work of preserving our history in the face of cultural genocide so long has seen recurrent trends, and so I'm wondering, like, do you view this as a new phase in the kind of like national pushback against centering stories of communities of color, or a just continuation? I'm just curious how you view this in relation to other efforts to curb our narratives and our own stories.
Thank you for that question. I see it as a continuing process. What is often called by pundits and others the underside of U.S. history has not really changed. There has been, not only by us, but certainly by other people of color communities, actions and work and struggle to change it. But we still, as a whole, don't have economic power. We certainly don't have political power. And the work that we've done to change that is being scaled back, as that's what this represents. So the point for me is to understand that this is part of the history of the United States, and this is this phase of the history. And so this means that we have to, from my perspective, learn from our past of struggle and continue that struggle, but in ways consistent with the new generations, new peoples, and new technologies. So I'm technologically not sophisticated at all, so that is not something I can do, but it's something that most of you can do. So organize, organize, organize in every way possible, and then some. I'm sorry. Okay, so as Graciela says, yes, indeed, de acuerdo, and Dolores commented on it this morning. The old style or old time organizing face-to-face of they say knock door to door to help elect politicians. Well, knock door to door to struggle and to get people to join LHC, Esperanza, the WPA, and all of the other organizations that y'all are members of.
Antonia, so thank you very much for that presentation. I just learned something. I have been tracking and following the Latino Museum sort of concept for some time. I was not aware of what has occurred with respect to funding. I've been involved with sort of some of the private sector fundraising for the effort. But it occurs to me that your suggestions, your call to action is very important, but it occurs to me that given the diversity in the room, that a specific strategy could be developed or should be developed, and it begins with making sure that whoever your congressman is, if you're a member of Latinos in Heritage Conservation, that there be a strategy as to who's going to touch base with who to keep this issue alive within the congressional folks that are responsible. So number one, the Hispanic caucus, of course, would be critical, and identifying a strategy for going to see them becomes important. There are a number of cities that have annual trips to Washington where they bring up issues for their cities. I think if, let's just take the top five, let's say Los Angeles, Chicago, San Diego, San Antonio, whatever. If you build that concern into the agenda that is presented when the cities go up there, it might bubble up faster. So that's another strategy that comes to mind. And an approach through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities would also, I think, be helpful. But my point is, your call to action requires a specific strategy and identifying the the folks that are really going to make the difference. But staying silent is not an option. I'm also occurs to me that there ought to be op-ed pieces put in newspapers wherever we're at, so that all of us are raising concerns, so that the public is made aware. I don't take this the wrong way. If I didn't know about this, it's a failure with me. But I would assume that that's happening to a lot of people that they didn't know. So it's a very helpful thing what you've just done, and that is raise our awareness of what's happened. And I think it's given us all a food for thought in terms of what specifically we should be doing to move as we move forward. To make this will happen, but it'll happen just because our raw numbers are so large. The question is whether it's going to happen next year or 10 years from now or 20 years from now. But it's time that it happens. So thank you so much for that presentation. Very enlightening.
You're very welcome. The precedent has been set, and it's a very dangerous precedent. The Smithsonian and the museum, the directors, they caved in. And at this point, I'm not so interested in dinging them for caving in. I'm interested in telling them we support the museum, establish it, and establish it without any interference by politicians of whatever stripe.
Antonia, just to build on what Luis just said, it would be really important for the bullet points that you pointed out, the historical narrative of what took place, to be on LHC website, so that when we do organize these meetings, we can pull from the timeline and we can speak with knowledge.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we can do that. It was kind of a bummer to be sitting there reading every item that ever passed, 139405, 8493. Ay, Dios, qué horror. Pero anyway, it needed to be done. I needed to understand what that bill said, how it said it, and what was included. The other thing that I just want to say, I didn't put it in the paper, but I do have to say, like Dolores, yo estoy más vieja que la lumbre. Well, Dolores wouldn't say that about herself. I'd say that about myself. And I've been around a long time, and we've been in the struggle for a long time. But sitting there reading all of the programs and all of the elements that were funded in the Smithsonian bill, and to see that we weren't funded was just incredibly painful. It just undid me for a while. And so what I'm trying to say by that is what the first panel talked about this morning, about trauma and pain and the effects of it. But pain or not, aquí estamos y no nos vamos. And so, así, yes. Thank you. So, and can you talk real loud porque estoy media sorda también para acabarla de moler?
Okay. ¿Puedes oír?
Yeah,
¿Está bien?
vale.
Okay. It's not lost on me that in this conversation around cultural displacement and genocide, that the op-ed was written by 3 Latino men. And so, I know we all know that in this room, hopefully, that white supremacy is a lie, and it's not only white people who believe it.
Yeah.
How do we invite back in Latinos who have bought into that lie, and invite them to take the collar and the leash off and to rejoin the fight?
By what we've been talking about all morning, is organize in whatever way possible. And in some cases, the organization can be real direct and right on and very political. In other cases, it can't. So you just have to assess and determine what works best in whatever situation you're in. And yes, we do need to keep inviting. Even when we're told no, just go back. So somebody else had a question, yes?
I don't know if it's my job to watch the clock, but I think there are 2 more.
Hello. Is it a safe assumption to make that part of the reason for this conservative pushback is influenced by the proposed location of the Latino Museum, which would be on the National Mall and thus would be seen as official history?
I'm sorry, I did not hear that. Could somebody repeat that question for him?
Hello?
Yep. Okay.
Is it a safe assumption to make that part of the conservative pushback is influenced by the proposed location of the museum on the National Mall?
No, corazón. It would be, the pushback would be there wherever it was. Yeah, if it was hanging in the sky, it would still be there. But I think it's important to think about all possibilities. And there was one time when we were told in the 90s, don't even think about a Latino museum as part of the Smithsonian in your dreams. Well, lots of effort and lots of struggle, and so it is. And yes, it will be on the National Mall.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I've had the opportunity to work at the National Park Service, and I was part of the office that supported the commission that created the report, and worked there for 2 years doing that. And then I worked at the Smithsonian and was the co-chair for the Smithsonian Latino Working Committee, which is one of the internal movements to try to lift up Latino stories. And so I was very hugely disappointed to see how the right-wing folks came out against the next exhibition. I also served as a reader for Presente, so I'm very familiar with Joanna Fernandez's work, and I was really looking forward to that exhibition. But what I'm really trying to get at, and you laid it out beautifully in the presentation, is that I feel like right now in the Latino community, we have these type of right-wingers who are really trying to produce a new ethnic white through this erasure, right? And this erasure is real, and we're feeling it all across the spectrum of color in our country. And what my concern is, if we don't create more spaces to unite the vast complexity of Latinidad, if we don't build coalitions with all the organizations, these folks are going to win, right? So we have to start to have this organization continue to do its work in coalition with other organizations doing this type of work. I've been working a lot with a group based out of New York called the Afro-Latino Forum.
Yeah.
There are organizations that are really digging into the idea of the intersections of the diasporas that make up this demographic that we call Latino today. And so I just really want to urge everybody to continue to build bridges, work outside of your comfort zone, and really combat this erasure, because we all know if you go to the Holocaust Museum in DC, what they teach you about erasure is that erasure is the first step to genocide. And so we have to take this stuff seriously.
De acuerdo. One last comment is, thank you very much. So one last comment is thank you, and yes, absolutely. But I also want to remind us that out of the civil rights movements of the 60s and 70s, that we worked across all those coalitions. So there were some of us who were at Wounded Knee. There were some of us who were at Alcatraz. There were some of us who were in different African-American communities. We all faced off against the National Guard to stop the war in Seattle. So yes, but do remember our histories, that we have historically worked across cultures and coalitions. So let's bring that back. And I know we have another panel, another very exciting panel. So I'm going to exit left, kind of hobble left. But gracias mil. You have been a just amazing audience. Gracias.